What I want to talk about at this meeting is SAML authentication. It's not really an inherently exciting topic for lots of people, but it is what I'm working on. The purpose of the workshop is to let people talk about interesting things that they're working on. So I think to hold on 1 second. I'm having some background noise. I'm going to close my office door. Sorry about that. I'm back now. So one piece of housekeeping is that I am going to start to impose a round robin system, at least within the leadership team of our case, so that everybody on the technical team from a leadership perspective will start to present in a round robin way. So we will start hearing from more people. And I may branch out from there to include everybody on the entire team so that everybody gets a chance to present to the company overall, at least every once in a while. There's lots of sharp people on our team, but not all of them are interested in volunteering to speak up. I think with a volunteer system, we end up hearing from the same people over and over again. And so we are missing from the workshop coverage, we're missing lots of things that people are working on and lots of things that people should know about because those people are not feeling up to volunteering. So, as I move to a round robin system, I think we will get more participation. So that should be starting up soon, hopefully. But all that being said, right now I'm gonna walk through a little bit about SAML, which is Security Assertion Markup Language. Here are some notes here, just what I want to talk about to make sure I don't forget anything that I meant to talk about. The constraints and the requirements that drive us to using SAML, what SAML is compared to single sign-on, a little bit about the implementation within our case. And then for most of the meeting, I will walk you through how login works using EEOC and the way that the Active Directory SAML authentication works in cooperation with our site and the customer site. This part is a key part. It took me a little bit to understand what the claims provider is versus the relying party. And anyway, again, here's the whole login process. So starting from what the requirements are, SAML itself just stands for Security Assertion Markup Language. It defines the way that two systems can exchange information about a security principle, ordinarily being a user that's trying to log in. From a FedRAMP perspective, it's a pretty strong requirement within FedRAMP that decisions about who is authenticated to be able to use the system not be made within our system that we maintain for the customer on a cloud site, but it has to be maintained at the customer site itself. That's this second part here. That's what SAML allows us to do. It allows us to have our case running on a system in our cloud. Are you guys all able to read the screen okay? Maybe I should try to increase the font size there, but that is really what is driving us to use this somewhat complex architecture. We can have our case running on a cloud site that we maintain, and we can have logins be authorized by the customer site. Obviously, for obvious reasons, on the customer side, they will not open their direct LDAP port, which would allow us to bind straight into their LDAP. That would be a horrible security issue in its own right. So SAML allows us to have proxies in between, so we can securely have a person log into our case, have them be authorized by the customer site, have that username be sent back to us, all in a pretty secure way. So that's what we're trying to achieve. SAML versus SSO. SAML actually isn't SSO, doesn't really have anything to do with SSO. We talk about it in that way, but it's not really. Want to think about single sign-on. That's where you log into Windows in the ordinary way, and then your Windows user ID is propagated into your web applications so that you don't have to sign in to those web applications again. I think in SAML, if we were hosting more than one application for the same customer, maybe when you log into one site through SAML, like our case, then you go in to log in some other application, then perhaps it might carry through, but it's not really a single sign-on solution. It's not a header-based authentication. It's, I will go through a logging process, but SAML and single sign-on are really different kinds of concepts in the way that we've been using it. In our implementation of it within our case, there's a Spring Security SAML module, which is actually very, very easy to use from a Spring security perspective. I'm not going to go through all the details, any of the beans involved. They are mostly the beans that the Spring Security SAML module it gives you. And essentially what happens on the RCase side is that we configure RCase with the address of our ADFS, the ADFS that we maintain on our site. And all the action happens on that site. So when we activate the SAML profile, within our case, we have a number of authentication profiles, the most common ones obviously being LDAP and SAML. When the LDAP profile is activated, when you go to log into our case, you go to the RCase login page. That's what you see on our dev and test sites. When the SAML profile is activated, when you go to log in, Spring Security is going to look at that SAML configuration. It will get the address of our ADFS site, and based on some configuration I will show you in a second, then it is either going to show you a login page from our site that lets you choose the system that you want to log into, or else it's going to redirect you straight to the customer site, and you will log in there. And then based on a login process I will show you in a second, after lots of hoops have gone through, then Spring Security receives back the authenticated user principal name. And then historically, what we've done in the past is that we look up in our LDAP based on that name, and then we have our, the groups that the user belongs to, and that gives them their roles, and then they can use our case in the ordinary way. There's actually a number of other information you can get back from the customer AD. They can send back the groups that they have on the customer site, and all kinds of other information that could come back. But historically, all that we get back is the user ID, which we look up in our LDAP, and that's how we know who the user is. So there's two directories involved: the customer directory, where they authenticate against, and then we have to have the same user accounts in our directory that has the RCase groups and whatnot. I think in HDS, when they add a user into HDS, we have to add them ourselves into our directory before they can use the system. I know that's how it works for OCFO and for NRC. Any questions about all this so far before I start to walk you through the login process? I'm not watching over in Teams, so you have to speak up versus doing the hand raising or whatnot in Teams. Okay, so let's start talking about the concrete way that the login happens. Because it is a SAML, which is kind of a cookie-based system, I'm going to bring up an incognito window. So we will go to here to EEOC, the prod system, which I just got working yesterday. That's the one I'm the most familiar with. So you will go to eeoc.icase.com/rcase, which is the ordinary RCase URL. It's always /rcase. When I hit enter here, obviously it's going to issue a GET request to /rcase. Because we have that Spring SAML profile activated that I mentioned a second ago, Then, Spring Security has a SAML filter. That SAML filter is going to look up the configured address of our ADFS site. And so this request that we're going to make to /rcase is going to get redirected over to our ADFS site. So remember here that we have the EOC rcase.com/rcase. And you may have seen, I don't know how good that Teams is. You may have seen the address bar flash a few times. So now we are here at stsccmontap.com, ADFS. I don't really know what LS stands for. And then we have a long SAML request. I'm not going to get into the cryptography that's involved here. Part of what happens between our site and the customer site is that we have to trust each other's certificates. And so that's how EEOC makes sure that only sites that they have declared that they trusted are allowed to use their ADFS site. And then on our part, we have to import their certificates as well, so that we know the answer really came back from EEOC. So as I mentioned before, based on some configuration, either you stop here the way that we have here on our ADFS site, and here you have to choose what system you want to log into. This happens now because there are two options. If there was only one, if you didn't have this Active Directory option and there was only stseeoc.gov, then there's no point in stopping here, and it would just redirect you straight onto the STS site. But not which is what happens at HTS. So in HTS prod, there's only one option, and so you don't stop here. So let me take a break here and talk about why you see these two and why they're named stseeoc.gov and Active Directory. So I'm going to open up a VM here, which is opened up to our ADFS server. So this is a remote desktop into ADFS. I can't really do a lot about these fonts that you see here in Windows. So this is it might be somewhat hard to read. I don't think I can do anything about it. Let me see if I can make this a smaller font. Display settings can't be changed from a remote session. So anyway, but the reason you see these two options, stseeoc.gov and Active Directory, is because and this is the ADFS control panel applet that Windows has. And when we want to log in, we want to go through what's called a claims provider, which I will talk about more in a second. The reason you see those two options is that our system is configured with two claims provider. The term claims provider means a system that's going to provide a claim. We want to have a user log in. That means that we want to, because we're using this ADFS site, then we have these two claims providers, either of which can verify the claim that the user is about to make, that they're a valid user, hence called a claims provider. I'm going to make a claim as a user that I am, I have such and such user ID and such password. So either of these two claims providers can take that claim and either verify it or deny it. You can see we have one, or hopefully you can see that we have one that's called Active Directory and one that's called stseeoc.gov. And hence we have these two options. The Active Directory allows you to authenticate against our internal directory. That's what you would use if you were one of our test users, myself or Shri or whoever else on the EEOC team can log in through here. Logging in through stseeoc.gov is going to redirect you to the EEOC site, and then you would have to have an EEOC account. So that's why we have these two things. Here you can see that we are on our internal site. ecmontap.com is just a convention that we use. This is equivalent to our media.com. So we're on our site. This is our ADFS server. And again, if we had 3 and 4 and 5 items in this claims provider trust, you would see them all along here. This will be an issue for us at some point in our architecture. We are thinking about supporting all of our customers that we might have on this Amazon account through this one ADFS. And that means as we get another 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 15 customers, hopefully, at some point we will have to try to figure out how to figure out, which one that this incoming browser wants to use, so people aren't having to choose like the 14th one of these options. That will be a good problem to have, but at some point we will have to solve it. So now if I choose stseeoc.gov, because of some information that's in here, then it knows to go to stseeoc.gov. So our case has no idea what's happening now. There's no configuration within our case about stseeoc.gov or even any knowledge of eeoc.gov at all. So this is all coming from the SAML system as embodied in this Active Directory Federation system, because we chose stseeoc.gov, and then there's some place in all these properties about here in these endpoints that you may or may not be able to see. Here it lists the single sign-on endpoints, stseeoc.gov ADFS LS. And you can see that that's where we got redirected to stseeoc.gov ADFS LS. So again, we are far away from our case now. And at some point, our case is going to receive back an answer from our ADFS, but our case again has no knowledge or configuration that points it into this system itself. So let me log in here, and then I will walk you through the process of how the account I'm going to log in as ends up getting propagated back to a user within our case. I have to get my EEOC was kind enough to provide us a test account on their eeoc.gov site, which made getting all this working a lot easier. So we have an ArtCase eeoc.gov. This is something you should pay attention to, because art.case at eeoc.gov is what our case is going to get. Actually, it's not. I mean, so this is what eeoc.gov is going to return to our ADFS server, which is obviously art.case at eeoc.gov is not a user in our system. And our system is going to be like 3334.art.case at eeoc.artcase.com. So there's a system I will go through in a second that will translate this incoming name we got from EEOC into a name that we have in our system. So let me give the password here. And this is something I've seen on eeoc.gov. Sometimes we have a long wait here. Hopefully this will work in a couple of seconds. It was working fine yesterday anyway. Ideally, there's not a lot to see. It will just get logged into our case. In the meantime, on the eeoc.gov side, we've been redirected to and now I can see, okay, here we go. It kind of flashed a few times, but then we do have a good login, and you can see we're logged into our case. The things that happen on the eeoc.gov side, I can't show you. Obviously, I don't have access to their ADFS. On their ADFS, they have some things similar to here, and they have a configuration that says what facts about the user that they will send back to us. And it's among those facts that we get back that we have to pick up and translate into an ArtCase user. I'm going to switch over to looking at the Windows event log. There is a long rigmarole here about how to activate this ADFS trace log. You're looking at ADFS tracing in the Windows event log. And then here we have a debug tab. And then here we have event ID 1000. Everybody's eyes are probably glazing over at this point, but it took me and John a long time to find this. But this is our key event. So this is the event that tells us what eeoc.gov sent back to us. Let me copy this into a local window so you can see it easier. So this is the key event to figuring out anything that is going wrong in our system. Let me just put this into OneNote. So this is actually they send back 3 pieces of information. These second 2 pieces don't help us. The first part here is the most important part. You can see, I'm not sure what happened there. I guess it thinks that this is a link. You can see that they send us a UPN. That's short for user principal name. So they send us. So this is the type of the field that they sent to us. And the important part is that here is the value. Remember, art.case@eeoc.gov is who I log in as. So this is what eeoc.gov sends back to our ADFS. And the rest of what I will show you is how our ADFS translates this into our case user, which is 334.art.case@eeoc.rcase.com. I didn't want to just do a string token in terms of just adding 334 in front and changing eeoc.gov to eeoc.rcase.com because the rules for translating the UPN into our Windows account name are not, they're not that easy to deal with. And anyway, it's just any kind of string manipulation is going to be hard to work with. Instead, what I wanted to do was to look up the user based on UPN. I keep on trying to click it and it keeps trying to open up a new window. I actually had to change the rcase installer to populate the user principal name within our system. And that is populated with their email address. For EEOC, the email address is coterminous with the UPN, so I can use them interchangeably. So this all tells you that for each of the customers, there's a certain amount of negotiation that has to go back and forth. We have to work with the customer to find out what they're sending, and then we have to make sure that based on what they're sending, that we are able to map that into our local users somehow. Anyway, we are starting with rcase@eeoc.gov, and let me go back to these ADFS rules. So this is our incoming record for sts@eeoc.gov. Again, I apologize if you can't really read it. And there are a set of claims rules that we have here. Let me copy each of these into OneNote so that you can see it a little bit better. The first one we have is to copy the UPN to EEOC ID. I don't think we really have to have this rule. It's all it's do. But anyway, I will show it to you. It took us some time to get this working, and this is what we ended up with, and I haven't messed with it since then. But see here, this says C is short for claim. This rule says you want to take the incoming claim, which is this type, identity claims UPN, the same as what I showed you up here. See up here we have 2005-05 identity claims UPN. So this rule says that we want to take the claim that has that tag, and we're just going to copy it to a field called EEOC ID. So again, this rule isn't really adding a lot of value. That's what we ended up with after a tremendous amount of pain, and then we got a working system. So I'm keeping it that way. So this rule is a more interesting one. This rule is where we take that UPN and then we look up the Windows account. So here it's saying we take this EEOC. Remember, we copied the UPN into EEOC. Now we're going to do an LDAP lookup. So we're going to find a record that has a user principal name, in this case equal to art.case@eeoc.gov. So we will look up an LDAP. We will look up in our internal LDAP the record that has that user principal name, and then we are going to return the SAM account name And somehow, if you don't also return the user principal name, it doesn't work. So ADFS is a funny system in some ways. But this query is going to return us two attributes. The first one being the SAM account name, which is what we really want. That's the actual user ID. And then, it just returns us the same user principal name that we looked up. And those are going to be bound to these two new things. This EEOC user ID fact will have the SAM account name, and this EEOC UPN fact that we don't really need anymore is going to be bound to this user principal name. So now we've done our user lookup, and we looked up the user in our system, and we have their SAM account name. So that is the second of the three rules. And then the third one is that we have to do something interesting to actually get it to be a Windows account name. This is only needed because of some weird way that Windows works. Because we're in the ECM on tap domain, this EEOC user ID is going to be this is the actual type it's going to end up having, because that's just what a SAM account name is. A SAM account name is a Windows account name. And for some reason, we have to add the domain in front. So at the end of all this, what we have now is, we'll say these three rules yield. So what we have now is we are going to have a EEOC user ID is going to be equal to ECM on tap. And then our SAM account name is a 334.arc.case. And so that's the user ID that we have now. So you will notice that this is still not an RCase user ID, but we're at the end of the STS-EEOC.gov rules. And now, because we're coming from EEOC.arcase.com, actually, I didn't mean to close that whole window. Now I've got to reopen the ADFS applet. Because we are coming from EEOC.arcase.com, so we talked about the claims per provider. We got a claim from STS-EEOC.gov, and we did some work on the incoming UPN, and we ended up with a SAM account name. So now Arcase is the relying party. See here, hopefully you see that EEOC.arcase.com is the relying party, because EEOC.arcase.com is going to rely on the claim that the claims provider made. EEOC.gov made the claim, that makes them the claims provider. EEOC.arcase.com is going to rely on that claim being valid, hence EEOC.arcase.com is the relying party. The relying party has its own rules, and these rules that I'm going to show you will get applied no matter what path you got to. So whether we got the claim from Active Directory or from STS-EEOC.gov, whichever way we came through, they're all going to funnel through these rules here. So the rules, the claims issuance policy that we have here is going to have to work whether we came from Active Directory or from the EEOC.arcase.com. Anyway, we just have a single rule in here that says issue EEOC.arcase.com ID. And let me copy this rule. So here we are taking the Windows account name. Actually, I guess I didn't explain this, and I didn't explain this rule in the correct way. Up here, I said that we bound the SAM account name into the EEOC user ID. This last rule from STS-EEOC.gov claims provider is going to take that EEOC user ID, and it's going to issue a Windows account name which has this value. So this is going to be Windows account name, Windows account name equals ECM on tap 334 Arcase. But we don't really want a Windows account name. We want, so to speak, an Arcase account name. And the way we get an Arcase account name is we take this Windows account name, We take out the ECM on tap. That's this regex replace. We take out the ECM on tap and replace it with nothing. And then we add on the eeoc.rcase.com. And at the end of all this, then here we have 334.arc.case, because that's what's left after you remove the ECM on tap /. And then we add on the eeoc.rcase.com. And this, at long last, is what gets sent out to RCase. This is what the username is. This is what the CM user ID is, and now our ACM user table. And from here, RCase can look up the groups that they belong to, and then we have a happy customer that is interacting with RCase there. I guess my session timed out and it went to a logout page. So anyway, so that is what I wanted to talk over. I think I talked over everything here. Issuing claim rules, again, is done on the EEOC side. The EEOC technical person has to configure their ADFS to send us the UPN. That's how we get the UPN. They issue it to us. Then on our part, we have incoming claim rules. The incoming claim rules are these 3 rules I described here that transform the RCase at eeoc.gov into the CCM on tap 334.rcase. And then we have the relying party rules being the eeoc.rcase.com rules that will give us the RCase user ID. And then we have a login into RCase. So all this happening, RCase itself knowing nothing whatsoever about EEOC, not their LDAP or not their login page or anything. So any questions or comments or feedback or questions? Is anybody still with me here? Anything that anybody wants to ask? Okay, thanks for calling in, Dan. And again, for everybody that didn't hear my spiel at the start, we are going to move to round robin presentations here. I think I will start with the technical leadership team on RCase. I will set up a schedule and we will just alternate, and everybody will have their week to speak about whichever that they're working on. And then, based on that experience, I might have it be pushed out to the whole team. Again, anybody working on other projects besides RCase or even besides RCase extensions, if you want to present on something at this time, let me know, and we will work that out. Otherwise, I will stop recording, and I will send out a recording link. Igor hopefully will put it on YouTube, and we will chat again next week. One last chance for anybody's comments. Thanks, Dan, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Dave. Bye.
Bye.